The mountains were always more than just a landscape to me. They were my connection to a meaningful past. Since childhood, the mountain cabin had been my refuge, my special place. It was where I felt free, protected, and at peace. Every part of that cabin had a story. Every corner was filled with memories of effort, sacrifice, and care. On that Friday, as I climbed the trail leading to the cabin, something felt different. The air was heavy, and the usual calming silence of the mountains felt tense. When I entered, I found my stepfather sitting on the couch. His expression was strange. Without looking at me, he said that he sold the cabin to pay his gambling debts. I was paralyzed. The world around me seemed to disappear. That casually spoken phrase destroyed years of dedication and love for that place. My hands trembled as I tried to find words, but my mind was cloudy. My head was spinning. How could he be so cold? That cabin wasn't just a piece of land with a building. It was my home, the symbol of my effort. For years, I had worked tirelessly to maintain it. Every nail hammered, every repair done with my own hands. It was where I found peace and renewal. I remembered all the mornings I spent there, watching the sunrise reflect on the mountains. It was where I planned my future, dreamed, and thought about everything I wanted to build. Now, everything seemed to have been stolen from me in seconds. He said that he had no choice. Either this, or worse, things would have happened. My mind oscillated between anger and despair. How could he? I knew he had problems with gambling, but I never imagined he would go this far. Still, he seemed unable to understand the extent of the damage he had caused. The cabin was no longer mine. He had signed a contract and handed over the keys. As he tried to justify his actions, I felt crushed by the reality that my most precious place was now just a transaction to cover his failures. The pain hit me like an avalanche. I left the cabin, unable to hear more justifications. The mountain air, which once brought me calm, now felt heavy. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't leave things like this. What he had done was not just unjust. It was a betrayal I needed to confront, and I would do whatever it took to get back what was mine. The next morning, I began my search for answers. I called old family friends and local lawyers to understand the situation. I discovered that the cabin's buyer was an investor, someone looking to turn rural properties into commercial areas. This made my mission even more difficult. I went to the buyer's office. The place was imposing, and he received me with an expression of indifference. I explained that the cabin was an emotional heritage, and that it couldn't just be sold without my consent. He listened, but was straightforward. He had legally bought it, and if I wanted it back, I would have to pay more than he invested. I left frustrated, but determined. I decided to start by investigating the sales contract. Maybe there was some irregularity that could be used in my favor. While going through the documents, I noticed something strange. My stepfather's signature didn't seem legitimate. I confronted him that same night. I showed him the contract and the discrepancy in the signature. He hesitated for a moment before admitting that he had falsified some details to speed up the process. Desperation, he said, had driven him to take such extreme measures. This revelation opened a new door. Now, I had a chance to fight legally to get the cabin back. I hired a lawyer and started gathering evidence. It was a tiring process, but each step gave me a sense of purpose. Meanwhile, the local community, who knew the cabin's history and its value to my family, began to support me. Some neighbors offered to help with legal costs, while others shared their own stories of loss and resilience. The legal battle wouldn't be easy, but I knew I was doing what was right. It wasn't just about reclaiming a property. It was about fighting for what mattered, even when everything seemed lost. The support from the community was a ray of hope amid the storm. As my story spread through the small town, more people joined the cause. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Marta, shared how the cabin had been a refuge for her during difficult times in the past. Her words motivated me to keep fighting. Meanwhile, the lawyer identified a crucial point in the case. Since I was a co-owner of the cabin by inheritance, the sale couldn't have been made without my signature. This strengthened our position, but it also meant my stepfather was in trouble. I confronted him again, this time with the certainty that justice was on my side. He seemed a shadow of the arrogant man who had shouted at me in the cabin weeks ago. The guilt was visibly weighing on his shoulders. He admitted that he never wanted things to go this far. He thought he could fix everything before I found out. But I explained that he destroyed something that was part of our history, and it was not just about money. It was about respect. We decided to proceed with the lawsuit, even if it meant fully exposing my stepfather's mistakes. In court, I presented my evidence and told the story of the cabin, from its construction by my grandparents to the emotional impact of losing it. The judge listened attentively and, after days of deliberation, ruled that the sale had been made improperly. The contract was annulled, and the cabin was returned to me. With the court's decision in my favor, the feeling of relief was immense. Recovering the cabin meant more than just getting back a piece of property. It was like recovering a part of who I was. However, the work was far from over. When I returned to the cabin, it looked different. The new owners had started sloppy renovations, leaving piles of debris everywhere. The marks of time were also visible: worn walls, broken windows, and an air of abandonment hung in the air. But instead of discouraging me, this only gave me more determination to restore it to its former glory. The community once again showed up. Friends and neighbors offered to help with the cleanup and repairs. Some donated materials, while others dedicated their time. Every hammer blow and brush stroke was filled with meaning. The cabin wasn't just being rebuilt physically, but symbolized the healing of old wounds. As for my stepfather, he was visibly remorseful. During the months we worked on the cabin, he appeared a few times to offer help. Initially, I hesitated to accept. I still felt anger for what he had done, but gradually, I realized that his presence was a silent plea for forgiveness. In a moment of truce, while we painted one of the walls together, he expressed his hope that I could trust him again one day. I replied that trust is built, just like this cabin. The cabin, once rebuilt, became more than just a family refuge. It was now a symbol of overcoming, unity, and, surprisingly, forgiveness. Months passed, and the mountain cabin became a vibrant and welcoming place once more. The walls, now revitalized, seemed to radiate life, and every corner of the house told a story of struggle and reconciliation. The view of the valley seemed more beautiful than ever, perhaps because, for the first time in years, I could look to the future with optimism. I began to use the cabin for more than personal getaways. I organized gatherings with friends, community meetings, and even retreats for city children who had never experienced the tranquility of nature. It was my way of giving back to the world and ensuring the legacy of the cabin continued. My relationship with my stepfather also found a new balance. We were not exactly friends, but there was mutual respect, born from the shared effort to fix not just a structure, but also part of what we had lost in our family relationship. He, in turn, started attending meetings to deal with his gambling addiction. Although he never openly asked for forgiveness, his actions showed that he was trying to change. One day, at the end of a community event at the cabin, he pulled me aside. He acknowledged that I had transformed the place into something he had never imagined. Deep down, he realized that the cabin had always been mine. He had just been too blind to see it. I didn't know what to say, but his sincere tone touched me. I responded simply, saying that the cabin now belonged to all of us. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, practicing your English regularly is the key to improvement. Keep reading, listening, and immersing yourself in the language as much as possible. Every step you take brings you closer to fluency. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to check out our other videos to continue learning and practicing. Click now to watch another video and continue your English learning adventure